Okay, my name is Eugene Kohn. I'm chairman of Kohn Pedersen Fox and one of the three founding partners of the firm, which was founded on July 4th, 1976. Bill Pedersen and Shelley Fox are the other two partners who were founding partners. That's a very good question. In fact, I have been debating and discussing what is architecture more lately, because in the most recent past, where the economy was quite successful, buildings became more sculptural than ever before, less rational, less functional, and more sculptural. And you have across the globe buildings that are leaning, twisting, turning, hunched over, being proposed or being built. That seem to be based not on function or cost or all the elements that make up architecture, but strictly on form and being an icon. The word icon seems to have become the most important one. When clients would talk to you about doing their building, they would say, "Mr. Kohn, I want an icon." Now, when you think of an icon, you immediately think of form. Is it round? Is it triangular? Is it some special shape? Or does it lean, twist, or bend, as I mentioned earlier? So I'm rather concerned, because I think great architecture isn't about just form. Form's obviously important, but solving the problem that the building needs to serve. If it's a school, it does one thing. If it's an office building, another. A hospital, another. Airport, another. Or a tall building, another. And is it tall building all office, or is it mixed use, hotel, retail, residential, whatever it might be, as part of it? So the program and the function seem to me to be very important to solve when you begin to design. And we live in a real world where costs play a major factor. So if you were building today versus 3 years ago, the budget you'd have today is far less than you did 3 years ago. So the buildings will automatically become, we'll call them tamer in their shapes, in their form, because nobody will finance today a building that is doing something other than working quite well for its function. So if you look at the buildings of Mies van der Rohe, or the philosophy of Eugene Kohn, which was all about understanding how space goes together, and how it works, how building materials fit and relate, how you detail, those buildings had a rationality to them, as well as a beauty, that many of our sculptural buildings, in my opinion, do not have. And you see it in places like Dubai, or in Russia, or other places where the shape became the way to express itself. And unfortunately, a lot of critics, architectural critics, began to be more concerned about with the shape and the form than they were about how it really fit in the urban landscape, how it related to the street life, to the adjoining buildings, and how it worked for the function. So for me, architecture is not one, it's all of those things. That's what makes it a very special art. It's more than art. It's not like a painting, I paint. It's not like a piece of sculpture. People have to live in it, they have to work in it, they have to get well in it, they have to learn in it, and maybe, whatever the use is. And our goal as architects is to create buildings that inspire people to do whatever it is in that space they need to do. But that inspiration comes from within the building as much as from the way it looks from the outside. Last point on that, I would say that most people could not describe to you the building they're in from the exterior. If you said, draw me a picture of the building you work in, they would have a hard time, because very few people actually stand and look at it and understand the shape. But they will understand the space they work in, the space they study in, or the hospital room they're in. They'll recognize that, they'll remember. And that's the impact that we have to be concerned about as much as this form. So for me, architecture is more than sculpture, more than form. It's a combination of the art and the architecture, the technology and the function. Now, architecture, actually, I teach, and when I talk to my students, I talk about what the importance of architecture really is. I mean, we create the environment that affects the lives of people in good or bad ways. You know, if you are building apartment buildings that have low ceilings, small windows, dark, dingy places to live, these people come home to an environment that's depressing, not one that lifts them. They take a subway in the underground, it's hot and crowded. By the time they get to work, they're already in bad mood. They're not looking forward to the day. So the spaces we create are very important. In schools, today the schools are far better for learning than they were when I went to school. You know, then the classrooms were all on one floor. You couldn't see the front of the kid because there was somebody in front of you. You couldn't see the blackboard. If you were too far back, you couldn't hear the teacher. But today the classrooms are tiered, so you get a good view. In other words, we are making the spaces better for the function, which I think is a very important role of the architect. So for living or for working, creating an environment that brings out the best in people. If you're in a hospital, you want a room that's going to make you feel like you have hope. Not that you're there to die, but you're there to get well, that there's still a life worth living. So all of these things, I think, we play one of the most important roles, even more than doctors to some degree, even more than lawyers, for certainly lawyers or accountants. We provide a very important role in society. And you know, when I was a young architect, people didn't think that commercial buildings, the towers in cities, the office buildings, hotels, and the residential towers were important. They're only doing low-rise schools, museums, and maybe individual houses. That was architecture. What they forgot about is that the individual who lives in a city is every minute of his or her life affected by that built environment of the city. So if it's not well done, if there's not proper open space and buildings of proper scale or dealing with sunlight, shade, and all of those factors, the quality of life is greatly reduced. So I think people's lives can be greatly improved by what we design and build. And therefore, I'm not just for building sculpture at very expensive prices that only a few people get to maybe appreciate. I think as an architect, and each one of the people who work with us are architects, greatest goal is to continue to create, invent, find new ways of solving problems, creating a better solution for the building, for our way of life. So innovation is key. Now, it's not possible in every project every time to change something and make it better, because many times you are limited by either the site, the program, or the budget to what you can do. But I think our goal is always to do it to the best that's possible. And being innovative is very important. We're creative people, you know, and that's our goal, is to constantly find better answers. And we do that by being innovative. Oh, it's very important. I mean, we live in a very competitive market. There are many fine architects worldwide. And in fact, as we became more global as a firm, you know, we started out working in maybe New York and LA and San Francisco. But as we became more global and ended up working in Europe and Asia, now the Mideast and South America and elsewhere, you realize how many wonderful architects there are. There are a lot of very good architects. So the competition to get work is extreme. In busy times, when there's a good economy, there are a lot more projects available and therefore more work for more architects. As the economies shrink, and we are in one now, the competition for what jobs are out there, what projects, is severe. And so you have not only the architects in the U.S. competing here, but from England and France and Germany and South America and Asia, they all want to compete. And that's true around the world. So the competition's fierce. And you have the younger architects, the older architects in between, the big firms, the little firms. Everybody is trying to get in and get their share. So to get work, you have to network a great deal. You have to call upon the people you know, your friends, and people that can introduce you to corporations, for example, or museums. Or as good as you are, as well known as you think you are, you still always need, I think, assistance in getting work. And the best architects, the biggest and best, all market, all use their network, whether it's social or business, professional, they all use it. So it's very important. Well, it's been I have to admit, I was raised to draw. So I paint, draw. I don't use the computer for any drawing. I use the computer for email, for information. But obviously our firm, and if you were walk through the whole office, you'll see everybody is working with computers, drawing with computers. So obviously it's been very important. The key, though, is we're global, and we have offices in London and Shanghai, in Korea and Hong Kong, in Abu Dhabi. I probably missed one someplace. And those are all connected through the internet. We're able to communicate with each other all the time. We can actually do a project 24 hours. Or start here, go to London, and then Asia. So you're constantly, or start in London, Asia, whatever it might be, constantly working together. We hold video conferences with our clients, which saves a lot of travel. You know, not all travel, you still need to see a client face to face. But we have a lot of meetings with the video and between offices to coordinate our way the firm is operating. So, and the trade of information, pursuit of new business, research about a client, research about a site. I mean, today you can get information instantly about a site that you took long, you have to go visit and photograph and study, you get it like that. With Google, you can be there. So it's been very, very important. I would say it's extremely important. And speaking from one who's not very high tech. You know. I think first is, I think everyone should go for a master's degree. So that means you have an undergraduate degree and a master's. And there are certain schools where you can just get a degree in architecture as an undergrad and not bother with graduate. The reason I say the former is that you should, I think for many, going to a good college to maybe even take liberal arts, studying literature, history, try to understand the world, because the trouble is if you just focus only on the profession of architecture, you may miss the fact that we serve a greater profession. And by understanding history, geography, cultural of other nations, you're going to be a better architect in working across the world. So I think getting a broad education and then followed by a master's of 3 years in one of the universities, that, I think, picking the university, you either pick it because some of the professors are people you want to study under. I know when I went to the University of Pennsylvania, I had Paul Rudolph, Eugene Kohn, they had Frank Lloyd Wright lectured, Corbusier, Gropius. I mean, we had an all-star cast of, Louis Mumford was the teacher, he was a professor. We had people that were so inspirational, who imparted such knowledge that you couldn't help but learn even if you didn't want to. Just exposure to greatness. Now, Ricolet was one of the great French engineers, came to teach at Penn, all while I was there. So it was an unusual group of professors and the dean who made it so good. So I picked a school that had the best, at the time, architectural group of professors who were willing to give the time to teach you, and critique you, be there with you. Rudolph would take us on trips to meet with other, went to see Philip Johnson in his house, or he'd take us all over. You need professors who care. And today it's a little harder because most of the professors are still practicing, have their own practice. It's very hard to get the time to give to the students the way that they did when I was a student. When they came to Penn, they stayed there and did nothing else. They didn't work, they just taught. And then maybe they worked afterwards. But today, we all try to keep I teach, so we keep a practice going. So it's not quite the same. You're not there living with them full time. And Rudolph would just sit with us and talk. Eugene Kohn would talk for 4 hours and inspire you beyond belief. You couldn't wait to start drawing. Those kind of professors, or he'd talk to you, go to his building and tell you what a brick wants to be. And you just, were hypnotized. It was wonderful. So, to me, that's a great kind of education. But there are many great schools here and abroad that you can benefit from. But there's no success like the one you make for yourself. I don't care how good the school is or how bad the school is. If you as a student don't put the time in, the effort, the study, you can't be successful. You can have all the great professors, but you've got to do the work. And so I always advise students that really, if you're going to make this career, you're at school, give it your full effort. And then in the summer, work for architects, you get the experience of, we hire like 40 architects in the summer, just so they can intern with us and learn what the practice is like. So that would be, with education, I think that's the way to do it. But obviously, everybody has their own feel about it. But I think being so serious about your work, because now you're a professional, and you have a big responsibility. It's not like, I love to paint, so I don't have a big responsibility when I paint. If I don't like it, I rip it up, and if nobody else likes it, it doesn't matter. I happen to like it, so that pleases me. But architecture, again, you take on enormous liabilities and responsibilities that affect people's lives. Physically, their lives, if something falls down or doesn't work. So you got to take it seriously. And it's like studying to be a doctor. And so in a way, I think, while I love the art of architecture, I think too much has been made of the aspect of the art and not enough of the reality of what architecture is and what the responsibility is to mankind when you build structures they're going to live in and work in, and that have to be safe and have to function and do the things they want. So taking it seriously is very important. That's a good question, and I'll respond to that. I have two things I wanted to start with because I think it's important. One is that I'm very fond, I love to work with young architects. We have in this office some of the most brilliant, fantastic young architects who even in a couple of years you can see are going to be great leaders and great architects. They have a presence and a skill and a personality. It's not just being talented. You need a good personality to help market yourself and to deal effectively with clients. So we have a lot of young people I'm just enormous admiration for. And we make every effort to teach them. We instruct them when they're here. We provide classes for them. We provide lectures. We have all kinds of design sessions where they can discuss their philosophy and critique. And in this office, the young architects can, if they have the best idea, it gets built. My idea is good, and and Chris's idea is better. We go with Chris's idea, and she gets the credit. So in that way, we encourage young people to participate and not be afraid to make suggestions and to not be afraid to be wrong, because you're not really wrong. It's your point of view. The greatest thing we can do is to give back as we get older to the young people, because they're the future of the profession and the future of the world. So to us, they're the most important group in the firm, are the young people. So that's number. Now to talk about the firm and how you expand firms and grow. When we started in 1976, I was a big optimist. I truly believed we would succeed and be one of the great firms. As optimistic as I was, I don't think I ever could have imagined that we'd be a firm of about 600 people working in 35 countries, that we would have employed people from 45 countries speaking 34 different languages, that we would be doing some of the greatest projects in the world, and that we would be playing a major role in a country like China's growth and development, among others. All of that is one of the great pleasurable surprises, despite my own optimism and belief. So that's number one. Two, I've always been a believer about leadership, and that to understand what being a leader means. So I teach leadership at Harvard. I was an officer in the Navy where I learned leadership, and I taught leadership in the U.S. Navy as well. And believe to really lead a firm, you need to have leadership skills, not just design skills, not just administrative skills. But leadership is to be able to inspire the people. First, you need a vision and a goal. You need to be able to inspire your people to follow that. But you also have to be able to give back to them the ability for them to grow and lead, so they become really good staff and employees. But leadership is trying to make the right decisions over all kinds of things. Should we grow, not grow? Should we go to China? Should we stay here? Should we hire this person, not that person? When do we fire? When do we open an office, close it? All that is part of leadership. And those decisions can affect the firm dramatically, good or bad. So when you take on the leadership of a firm, creation of a firm, it's a very big responsibility. So while it's fun to say you're the boss means you work the hardest, have the most responsibility, and you have to care about all the people who work with you, because you're responsible for them to some degree. So but what we did, my partners and I, when we started, we said, look, we want to have a firm that provides opportunities for future young architects to come in this firm, to grow, be promoted, and eventually be partners, and eventually lead the firm. That was our goal. And today we have, I think it's 16 or 18 partners across the globe, mostly here, but in London, 5 in London. Many have grown come in at 25, 30 years ago. Young kids have grown with the firm, have become super architects, super leaders. And I'm very confident that I could stop work tomorrow, Bill could stop work tomorrow, and this firm would continue to do great, because we have such fine young and middle-aged leaders who are prepared to take over and do a great job. But you got to build it. You can't just assume it's going to happen. You have to train people. You have to coach them. You have to work with them so they become leaders and can replace you. I think the greatest satisfaction or accomplishment is not all that we've done, but the ability to leave this firm tomorrow and know it will succeed the next day. Because if it doesn't, then you're failed. Because we've built it to this point, and Bill and I decided to sit on a porch someplace, rocking chairs, reading a book or whatever, and the firm collapses, then we didn't do a good job. Because we're supposed to build a firm that lasts. Our goal when we started was not for the firm to stop when we retired, but to continue. You know, a firm like Richard Meyer, or a firm like, they're good friends, but a number of the single name firms will close when that partner leaves, because there's nobody to take his place. Charlie Gwathmey is a good example. When Charlie Gwathmey died just a short while ago, they had to close the firm. And he had a nice firm there. But without him, he's written about all the time, he's made the focal point. There was no focal point and no firm. Yet there were good people. We don't want that to happen. We wanted enough good people to be here so that when Bill and I decide to do something else, there's a great firm here without us. And I believe we've done that. And I believe with a little more coaching, they're ready to do that. Yeah. So, but for young people, they have this is the last point. If you start the firm tomorrow, now remember this is 34 years later. So over 34 years, a lot's happened, but we were building all the time to this point. And you have setbacks, bad economy, you lose some projects or people, but over the time we kept going up. And that was our goal. And we did it with this last point I do want to make. There's a big difference today between what the press perceives as great architects, which are always the individual and the celebrity, and those who decided to get more anonymous with a firm and build a great firm. And there's some celebrities who have firms larger than us, and they don't do all the work. No one architect could do a whole job anyway, unless it's a small house. And to make it seem to the public that this one architect is done the design, the working drawings, got it built, while chasing all these other projects is impossible. You can't have, as in the case of one of them, 18 offices, 1,600 people, and do all the work. Why do you need 1,600 people if you could do it all yourself? So the public gets it wrong because the press plays it up that, this architect's done it all. And it's not right. Nobody else gets credit. We, on the other hand, give credit to everybody who works on a project. And Bill and I could have made ourselves celebrities. We're attractive enough, smart enough that we could have, and we didn't. We intentionally kept it as a firm. And Chrissy and Sue also know that in any given day, everybody else gets credit. They're listed for this, for that they did. Because they, in fact, did it. Why shouldn't they get the credit? Big difference. So it's the celebrity firm versus the team firm. And architecture is about teamwork. Not just architects, engineers, contractors, material suppliers, clients, community. I mean, everybody plays a role. And it is a big thing. In fact, to do a building, last point, to do a building is one of the toughest things there is to do. Think about what you have to do to get it approved. You come up with this design and say, God, it's fantastic. Now you got to convince the client it's fantastic and they should afford it. But you also have to convince the city that it's approvable. You have to convince the community, and here the communities play a big role, that they want this in their backyard, and they'll probably fight it. And before you know it, you have all these battles of people against the building, for the building. And so to get it approved, and then you have to get it built. You have to depend, we're like a composer. You have to depend on the orchestra to play it. You have to depend on the contractors to build it. And then the contractors have to be willing to do what your plans say. And not say, well, if you substitute this material for that or this, which clients say, oh, well, I'm going to save this money, so they do it. To get your building built, the way you designed it, the way you believe is correct, is one of the greatest accomplishments anybody could do. We don't have the ability of the government to build a jet plane the way they want it, because nobody's going to criticize it, They want to build a jet fighter plane, they're going to build the best jet fighter plane they can. But us, we have a lot of people fighting us to get what we want built. So for an architect to get from zero to there, finished, and you can look at any of our finished buildings, is an enormous undertaking. And you need teams, you need a whole team to do that, not one person. So anyway, my speech for that.